It started like any other Tuesday morning, except this one would set into motion one of the most infuriating and oddly satisfying battles of my life. My husband, a veteran, had lost the ability to walk years ago. He had been through enough already: combat trauma, the grueling process of rehabilitation, the slow crawl of acceptance that his legs would never carry him again. But through it all, he held on to his dignity, his humor, and his stubborn independence. His wheelchair wasn't just a piece of metal, it was his freedom, his car, his lifeline, and, in many ways, his badge of resilience. Every time I saw him roll down the driveway to check the mail or greet the neighbor's kids, I felt proud of how he never let life keep him down. That's why the thin, smugly worded slip of paper taped to our door that morning felt like a knife. It was an HOA violation notice. The line that stood out, bolded in ink, read, "Unapproved vehicle parked in driveway. Must be removed immediately. Fines will apply." At first I blinked, trying to make sense of it. We didn't have an extra car. We didn't own an RV, boat, or motorcycle. The only thing outside was his wheelchair, tucked neatly against the edge of our driveway like it always was when he came inside. My husband, already sipping his coffee, looked up at me when he saw the color drain from my face. I handed him the notice without a word. His hands, calloused and scarred from years of service, trembled slightly as he held the paper. His jaw tightened, and I could see the storm brewing behind his eyes. "They're calling my wheelchair a vehicle violation," he said, his voice a mix of disbelief and rage. I tried to calm him down, telling him maybe it was just a clerical error, but deep inside I knew exactly who was behind it. Karen. Every neighborhood has one. Ours was no different. Karen was the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, the kind of person who seemed to think she was ordained by some higher power to police every blade of grass, every paint color, and every parked car in a 3-block radius. She had once left a note on a neighbor's door because their kids left a basketball hoop outside overnight. She had reported another family for having a garden gnome she claimed was tacky. But targeting my husband's wheelchair? That wasn't just petty, it was cruel, and it lit a fire in me I hadn't felt in years. I stormed down to the HOA office that same afternoon, violation notice in hand. Karen was sitting behind the front desk, nails perfectly manicured, hair in a stiff blonde bob, lips twisted into what could barely pass as a smile. "Oh, hello there," she said sweetly, her voice dripping with faux politeness. "Is there a problem?" I slapped the paper onto the counter and pointed at the line accusing us of having an unapproved vehicle. "You want to explain this to me? That's my husband's wheelchair, his medical equipment. Not a car." Karen's smile didn't falter. In fact, she leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and with a tone so condescending it made my skin crawl, she said, "Rules are rules. No vehicles are allowed outside of garages. If it has wheels, it counts. Maybe you should think about storing it somewhere else." My mouth went dry, and for a moment I couldn't speak. Was she serious? Did this woman really just lump a wheelchair into the same category as an RV or a boat? "It's not a vehicle," I hissed, my voice shaking now with both rage and disbelief. "It's his legs. It's his independence. And you're calling it a violation?" She gave a little shrug, eyes gleaming with that smugness only a true HOA tyrant can muster. "Look, I don't make the rules. I just enforce them. You can either comply or face the fines. Simple as that." I left that office fuming, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock the front door when I got home. My husband was waiting in the living room, his face tense with the kind of quiet anger that worried me more than shouting ever could. When I told him what she said, he let out a bitter laugh. "So, my wheelchair is a violation now. Guess being disabled isn't HOA approved." He tried to joke, but his voice cracked, and I knew it cut deep. That night, neither of us slept well. I kept replaying Karen's smug face in my head, her dismissive tone, the way she tried to strip away his dignity with a smile. By morning, I was done playing nice. If she wanted to play games, we'd play them by the book, but on our terms. I started by digging into the HOA's rules. Page after page of nitpicky nonsense. Grass height, paint shades, garbage bin placement, but nowhere, not once, did it specifically classify medical devices as vehicles. It was a stretch, a manipulation of language, and she knew it. That's when I decided to go bigger. I contacted the local disability rights office, explained the situation, and sent them a copy of the violation notice. The woman on the phone gasped and immediately told me this wasn't just unfair, it was illegal. The Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, protected my husband's right to use and store his wheelchair wherever he needed for accessibility. Denying him that was discrimination, plain and simple. That was all I needed to hear. With their help, I drafted a formal complaint against the HOA. Every letter I sent, I copied to the entire board, the city council, and even a local news station. If Karen wanted a fight, I was about to give her the legal equivalent of a nuclear bomb. The weeks that followed were tense. Karen didn't back down immediately. Oh no, she doubled down. We got another violation notice, this time threatening escalating fines. My husband started to feel the weight of it all, the constant battle just to exist in his own home, and it broke my heart. I could see the shame flicker in his eyes, the silent question of whether he was somehow a burden, whether his disability was causing all this chaos. I grabbed his hands one night, looked him in the eye, and told him, "Don't you dare blame yourself for this. You didn't do anything wrong. She's the problem, not you, and I swear to you, I'm not letting her win." He nodded, but I could see the heaviness still linger. That only fueled me more. Finally, the day of the HOA meeting arrived. Word had spread through the neighborhood. Apparently, people were sick of Karen's reign of terror, and the idea that she targeted a disabled veteran had people furious. The room was packed when we rolled in, my husband sitting tall in his chair, me at his side. Karen strutted to the front, papers in hand, clearly ready to remind everyone of the sacred rules. But before she could launch into her speech, the disability rights lawyer I had brought with us stood up. He cleared his throat, pulled out a folder, and began reading. This HOA is in direct violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. You have attempted to fine and penalize a disabled resident for the use of necessary medical equipment. Not only is this discriminatory, it opens you up to lawsuits and substantial fines. Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's smile faltered. She tried to interrupt, sputtering. "That is not what this is. This is about vehicles." But the lawyer shut her down with one icy look. A wheelchair is not a vehicle. It is a mobility device, and your attempt to classify it otherwise is not only baseless, it's cruel. The board shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The room buzzed with angry whispers. Neighbors stared at Karen, some with outright disgust. My husband sat there quietly, watching her squirm, his hands folded calmly in his lap. For once, the power wasn't in her hands, it was in ours. The lawyer continued, outlining potential fines, the legal ramifications, even the possibility of federal charges if they didn't reverse the violations and issue a public apology. By the time he finished, Karen looked pale, her perfect composure cracking at the edges. I didn't mean, I was just, she stammered, but no one was buying it. One of the board members finally cleared his throat and announced, "The violation notices will be rescinded immediately. We apologize to Mr. Husband's name for this treatment. This will not happen again." The room erupted in murmurs of approval, some even clapping. But the best part? The HOA wasn't off the hook just yet. Because of the official complaint, they were slapped with thousands of dollars in fines and were forced to undergo mandatory ADA compliance training. Karen, who had basked in her little throne of power for years, was humiliated, her reputation shredded in front of the very neighbors she lorded over. After that meeting, her presence around the neighborhood dwindled. No more smug notes, no more nitpicky citations. She had been effectively defanged, and everyone knew it. My husband? He held his head higher than I'd seen in years. That night, when we got home, he turned to me and said, "You fought for me when I couldn't. You reminded me I'm not powerless." I hugged him tight, tears burning in my eyes, and whispered, "You'll never be powerless. Not while I'm here." Looking back now, I realize it wasn't just about Karen, or the HOA, or even the violation. It was about standing up to someone who tried to strip away dignity from the person I loved most. It was about showing him, and the world, that his disability didn't make him less. It made him stronger, braver, and worthy of every ounce of respect. Karen thought she could bully us into submission, but in the end, she was the one who had to bow. And that's the thing about people like her. They think rules are their shield, their weapon, their excuse. But when those rules are twisted to hurt the vulnerable, justice has a way of snapping back harder than they ever expected. And, in this case, karma didn't just bite her, it chewed her up and spat her out.